This episode is brought to you by Summer School Electronics. With pedals like the Snow Day Delay, the Pep Rally Fuzz, the Trash Panda, and my personal favorite, the Science Fair, which is two classic dirt pedals in one, with a mid-boosted overdrive on one side, a black lab rat circuit on the other, and a blend knob to blend between them to find the perfect classic stacked dirt sound you're looking for, it's hard not to find something you'll love. Mark builds all of his pedals by hand in Syracuse, New York, where he also works as a full-time educator. In addition to the super fun graphics on their pedals, Mark also offers custom artwork. Want your dog's face on a pedal? He can do it. Want your face on a pedal? He can make that happen too. Go over to summerschoolelectronics.com and make sure to tell him that 40 Watt Podcast sent you. This episode is brought to you by the supporters of 40 Watt Podcast over on Patreon. Go over to patreon.com/40wattpodcast, where for as little as $3 per month, you can help support the podcast and get every episode ad-free. For $5 a month, you'll get every episode ad-free, as well as a bonus episode every week. I can't overstate how thankful I am for the support of my patrons, and hope you'll consider joining the team and helping keep this show on the road. Hey y'all, welcome back to 40 Watt Podcast. 40 Watters, I'm so glad to have y'all for this episode. My name is Philip. I am your host. Episode this week is going to be a lot of fun. This is an episode that was made possible by my trip to NAMM this year, but also I'm going to mention that this episode is made possible by a sponsor, and y'all have heard a bunch of sponsors. If you're listening on the main feed, you've heard the bumpers in the middle, you get the ads. But also this episode and the rest of the episodes in the season are brought to you by Grez Guitars. So make sure you go over and check out Grez Guitars on Instagram or on the website. The links are all down below. Barry's making some really, really rad stuff. He has a new guitar coming that actually may be out by the time this episode airs, but I am not sure, so I can't say. So at next week's episode, I definitely think I can say, but recording these in advance, as y'all know, try to get these ready for y'all. And so I don't know if it's out yet, but if so, go check out his Instagram and you'll see all the cool stuff that Barry's making. I've got a couple of Grez guitars myself, and I think they're absolutely incredible guitars. They're some of the best I've ever played, period. So moving on from there, super excited to have Charles from Silktone on the podcast this week. Charles, how are you?
I'm doing real good. How you been today?
Man, it's been a day. We're recording this in February, y'all, and it's been, I don't know, it's been the most active for the podcast, just to put it in real terms. And I'm recording a bunch of episodes back to back to back to back with people, and it's the most, I don't know, I'm actually feeling like a type A put together human being, which is not who I am. I feel like I'm prepared. And so
have you been reaching out to people to set episodes up, or is everyone just flooded? Because I know I reached out to you and was like, hey, let's finally do it.
Yeah, it's been a combination. It's been a combination of a bunch of people I reached out to at NAMM and a bunch of people that just in general I've been reaching out to make things happen. And it's like everything's lining up. So I think after the week of our recording, I will have I will have episodes recorded up through the end of April. Like I'm right done up through April, which is great, unless I had something timely I needed to talk about in an episode. So it's fine. So Charles, we got to hang out in California, not technically at NAMM, but at the Effector Market that was put on there, which was a super rad setup. I barely got to play anything. I've spent most of the time talking to people and hanging out.
Same. I think I showed up at 10 a.m., sat at a table, and didn't leave that table until until it closed, because so many people just kept coming through, and like different people would sit at the table and we'd talk to everyone, and then there's so many different engaging conversations. And I remember talking to you while we were sitting there with Joel and some other people, and talking to you for like 20 minutes without realizing who you were.
Yep.
And then being like, oh, we have talked before.
Yeah, I did the exact same thing, because we've only really talked on Instagram. And so it was like this realization. It was actually when we talked about the Guitar Nerds Gear of the Year that I realized, oh yeah, now I know who I'm talking to. It's like it all clicked. My brain is so bad with like, now we've never met before that time, like in person. So you know, I don't feel bad there, but my brain is just bad at remembering people out of context. I think I've
There's a lot
talked
of
about
people in the
this.
world.
Yeah, there's a lot of people, but I'm real
Yeah.
bad about it. I've talked about this on a previous podcast where my brain will do a thing where if I see someone in a space that I'm not used to them being in, like if I happen to see, arbitrary example I give is like the clerk at the gas station down the road that I see like 4 times, 5 times a week, right? If I
Mhm.
see that person in Walmart, I'm not going to recognize them because they're not at the gas station. I won't recognize them.
Your brain just doesn't go there.
Yeah.
It doesn't. It has regionalized
Yeah,
compartments.
that's
Yeah.
exactly. It completely compartmentalizes everything, and
Yeah.
so but that translates into I'm bad with actors. I'm bad with musicians. To be honest, my wife has to tell me all the time, "Oh, you've seen this actor. They've been in this, this, and that." I'm like, "Yeah, you need to give me a role. What did they play?"
We were just talking about that actually at Nam. City, you met City,
Mm-hmm.
my girlfriend. She was asking. We were talking about being starstruck or something, and she's like, "What would you do if you saw like Brad Pitt on the street?" And I was like, I mean, I'd probably go up to him and be like, "Brian Pitt? Is it Brian Pitt? Babe, it's Brian Pitt." You know. And,
That would be awesome.
I probably do that on purpose, though.
Yeah, yeah. I don't get starstruck too often. I'm pretty chill. You know, people that listen to this podcast know that I used to work at a blues club owned by Morgan Freeman, and so there's a point where famous people don't freak you out too much.
No, yeah, they're just people.
They're just people. That's it.
Yeah,
They're just people. But and most of them have good sense of humors.
yeah.
Some of them don't. I don't know which ones. I'm not naming names. I'm not calling anybody out. But
Yeah.
yeah, most of them have really great senses of humor. So if you're funny with them or act like they're nothing, that's usually cooler. That's
Well, I've had people come through here, and it's like I've had to tell my people before in the workshop, like it's just a person. They're normal like me and you, like no gawking, you know. And
just be
yeah, it's
cool.
hard because some people are like that, and it's you everything's chill and you see them and it's whatever. And then other times you get completely starstruck and it catches you off guard. I saw because I never do that. I never get starstruck.
Mhm.
I've seen a bunch of people. It's whatever. I don't care. It's another human being. Who gives a shit?
Yeah.
But the I saw Yola Tango the other day. It's a favorite band of mine. I've seen them a bunch of times, and I met them the other night, and I was a little drunk, and I kind of fanboyed out a little bit. I was like, "Oh my god, you know, you guys like wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for you," you know, and it was
It's
funny.
a
I
fair
laughed
moment.
about it, thinking about it the next day, but whatever.
See, I love that because it does occasionally happen. Like the first time I met Willie Nelson, I kind of freaked out a little bit. Um,
The first
the
time,
first time,
not
not after that, just the first time. So
in
that
the several times you've met Willie Nelson. No big deal.
it's it's 3 times grand total, three
Wow.
times. But it was because again, I worked at the blues club that Morgan Freeman owned,
Mhm.
and they were buddies. So they would he would come in every now and again. And sorry, I was fixing something real quick. And he would come in, and they did a show at the club, and it was real chill. But I met a
Mhm.
lot of people through working there because people would either come through, because where I lived was like this blues mecca, so it attracted a lot of
Yeah.
famous musicians and folks like that. But also just because it was owned by Morgan Freeman, so occasionally we'd have someone through for some event or something going on. So uh, I don't normally meet famous people. Most of my famous people are through that experience and dealing with that.
Right.
So, but
That's cool.
yeah, so Willie was one of those. And there was the story that most of my listeners have heard of when I met Robert Plant. That one was a little. I was cool, but it was hard. Like
Yeah.
it was real tough.
I went into a guitar store in Austin one time, and Robert Plant had like just left, and the guys were all shaking, talking about him, and I was like, "Whoa, cool! Like, what's Robert Plant like?" And they're like, "You know, he kind of just really liked to talk about Robert Plant." I was like, I mean, if I was Robert Plant, that's probably all I'd want to talk about too, I guess.
That's so true. Now,
Yeah.
that wasn't my experience, but also mine was a little different. He was at a show I was playing, and his table was the only table that had people at that show. It was like I was playing to
Uh,
7 people, and one of them just happens to be Robert Plant.
Damn.
Yeah, it was cool.
Stressful.
It wasn't until I knew. I didn't know until the end of the
uh,
first set because I couldn't really see out,
yeah.
and so I don't know. It was really cool. I got to sit and talk to him for a while. He bought me a beer. It was a great time. But
Wow, right on.
yeah, I didn't get nervous until after I knew he was there. Yeah. So the
That's
second
good.
set was
That's
rough.
that's probably the best.
Yeah. So Charles, let's back up here a little bit. Let's talk about uh how'd you get into guitar? How'd you get into music? What made you decide you wanted to start making amps? And
Hmm.
then on top of being an amp maker, you decided to be a complete lunatic and make guitar pedals.
Yeah.
Because all guitar pedal makers are lunatics. That's my general consensus. And so
Yeah,
let's get the life story here.
yeah, that's accurate. Oh, how did I get into music? My stepdad probably got me into the most music when I was real young, like I don't know, 10, 9, 10 years old. A lot of Beatles and a lot of 70s stuff that I didn't like at the time, like Dire Straits and Steely Dan and all that kind of stuff. He would listen to it on repeat just constantly. And I absorbed it, but at the time was like, I'm not into this. I like the Ramones and the Misfits and stuff like that. Just a lot of early punk. But I started I started playing guitar. I was probably 16, 17.
Okay.
Just I never really did the band thing. We had a few little garage bands, but I never like played out as a kid or anything. And I just kind of farted around and did my own thing. So from a very young age with guitar, I just spent time tweaking knobs and making sounds. Like I didn't take lessons. I still don't know how to play guitar. I can pull it off and fake it pretty well, and I'll play some jams, but I don't. I have so many friends that are so good at guitar and they know what they're doing all the time, and that just blows my mind because I never know where I'm at on a guitar. But anyway, yeah. So early on, just turning knobs on my amp, tweaking pedals, a lot of Boss pedals. I think my first amp was like an AC30.
That's a heck of a first amp.
It was cool, but this was before all this, like all the new like little lunchbox amps. You couldn't get a little $200 Yamaha plug-in that does everything, or a little, you know, uh, Boss Katana or whatever. You couldn't get those then. So it was like, you'd get the small Epiphone combo, small Fender combo, or an AC30, and I was like, fuck it, I'll go for it. At the time, I was listening to a lot of like older shoegaze stuff, like
Okay.
Spaceman 3 and stuff like that, and I fell in love with that big reverb sound. And I, you know, doing a throwing a guitar in front of an AC30 and getting that cranked like feedbacky reverb, I was like, oh, that's it, that's the sound. So I saved up and got it. I knew some people at Guitar Center, so I got a pretty good deal. But and then it just went from there. I got into I didn't start building amps or tweaking pedals and stuff like that right away. What got me into building was actually home stereo, like hi-fi.
Oh,
So I was really into records and listening to records, and just I'd buy anything I could. We'd always go record shopping, and I'd buy stuff. And I was looking for a good pair of headphones one time, and I went into a hi-fi store in the town I grew up in, and I had never seen a tube amp before that in that context. I had my AC30 and everything, but I'd never seen like a stereo tube amp with all the tubes exposed and
yeah.
everything. And I had, more importantly, never heard one reproduce music like that. So I was blown away just hearing the crazy speaker systems, and I just immediately fell in love with it and was like, I need this in my life. How do I buy this? And they were like, oh yeah, it's 120 grand. Like, and I'm like 19.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh,
You're like that at 19. You're like that much money doesn't exist. That
that doesn't exist. Yeah. What am I, Bill Gates? Like, uh, Yeah, no, I'm not a billionaire. I can't do that.
Yeah.
So I ended up they hooked me up with an amp because I kept going in and bugging them. I go I bring records and listen to stuff. And they were like, dude, here, we'll give you an amp. It's really cheap, but it'll get you started. And they gave me this like little $500 amp. And I just started reading and reading and reading online and learning how to tweak it because it didn't sound as good
Well,
as
yeah.
the store. And I ended up getting better speakers, better amp, and then reading a bunch about how amps are made and kind of trial and error, pulling that thing apart and like modifying it. And then I got into building my own hi-fi stuff after a couple of years. And then that got really boring because I got really good at it. But then once you get it right, it's like, all right, what next? Like those are just accurate. That's all you want them to do.
Right.
So then I got more interested in the guitar side of things and experimenting with that because I found these cool parts along the way that were really colorful and not so great for hi-fi, but it was like, wow, that's a really cool tone if I do the power supply this way or whatever. And I started applying that to guitar amps and kind of took everything I knew that was cool from hi-fi, like really, really low noise and like pristine clarity, but then the things from guitar, like really colorful tone and cool distortions, and making the power supply kind of suck on purpose, so it interacts in a way that you want it to.
Yeah.
And man, it was so much more fun because anything goes.
Yeah, that's the cool thing about guitar amps in comparison because there's only so pristine you can make the reproduction of music up to a certain price point, and like
Yeah.
without getting really insane. And I've seen some really insane hi-fi setups, and like I used to think, when I first heard about tube hi-fis, like everybody talked about like Macintosh and some of the
Mhm.
stuff along those lines, and I was like, wow, like and they were only talking like $4,000 and $5,000 for an amp,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh, that's so insane, and I can't imagine like paying that much for a hi-fi receiver. And then I discovered that there's a world of six-figure
Oh yeah.
hi-fi amp
It's
receivers, and I'm
crazy.
like, this isn't my world.
It's really what I should be doing if I was a smart
Oh
person, but
yeah,
I hate money for some reason. I don't know. So because I'm really good at it. I make them really good, but I don't really like dealing with that crowd much.
yeah. If you think
And
guitar
it's not.
players are picky and finicky,
Oh my god, yeah, the hi-fi enthusiasts, audiophiles are a lot worse. So yeah, it's not as fun. So even if it's funny because like the same amount of parts that I put into a guitar amp, if I did what I do with my guitar amps in a hi-fi amp, they'd probably cost 20, 30, 40 grand.
oh wow,
And just because of the competition out there and what they sell for and the market and everything. So um and people would pay it because they hear it and they go, oh my god, it's incredible. But it's just not fun. So I don't like doing it.
yeah. So you start building guitar amps. You
Mhm.
release the I what is the actual model name? The Silktone amp. Like
Yeah,
that's just it? Just the Silktone amp? Okay.
that's it. That's
Okay.
the first one. Yeah.
That's what I thought. I wanted to make sure, but it
Mhm.
sounded wrong. It felt like there should be another word in there. And you decided to go kind of a weird direction with it. You did KT88s in it.
KT 66.
66. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. I knew it was an even number that repeated. It's fine.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
my brain, again, the ADHD. I hold on to some facts that are just completely ridiculous. Like,
Yeah.
why do I know this random definition of this word that I looked up in third grade, but I don't remember like that? Um,
It's a really common. Everyone says, "Oh yeah, KT88s." They're way more prevalent out
yeah,
there. Like there's way more amps with KT88s in them. So
yeah, which is not. There's a whole bunch of them, but they're still a lesser common tube,
oh
and then you
yeah.
get even lesser common with the KT66. So, what made you decide to work with this obscure? Not, it's not obscure, but it's way different. It's not as prevalent as 6v6, 6L6,
Yeah.
EL34, EL84.
So I had worked with it a bunch in hi-fi. I really like it. It's one of my favorites. It's just really musical and well balanced. You get a huge bottom end, but still a really soft and beautiful high end. But you don't lose the mid. It's just kind of the best of everything. I've always felt like, and I hadn't really messed with it in a guitar amp until I played a vintage JTM 45,
Oh yeah.
and I just hadn't considered it, because it had been a long time. I hadn't messed with pentodes and a hi-fi amp in a really long time, because I started getting into more like really obscure tubes with my hi-fi stuff. And when I played that JTM 45, I was just like blown away. I was just like, oh shit, this is one of the best amps I've ever played. And I was still fairly unfamiliar with like the huge world of historic tube amps at the time, and I realized, oh, there's KT66s in this thing. um I know I already love these tubes. I had to start trying them out, so I tried it in my circuit, and that's when it was kind of like the aha moment where like something was missing. I had been designing the amp for a couple of years,
Right.
just tweaking it, getting it where I like it, and it just sounded like other stuff, which is fine. Like it sounded good, but it didn't have that unique character to it,
Yeah, yeah.
and so I switched over to a single-ended design where it's just one tube handling the whole power signal, and used the KT66, and I couldn't stop smiling. I was playing it, it was like, oh man, like that's it, that's the one right there. So I just haven't looked back. Like I've done I did another amp with the KT66, and then we're doing a couple more also. So
Oh, rad.
that are all going to use that tube. So we will eventually release amps that that use the more typical, 6V6 or 6L6. But I like that tube a lot. So
Well, I mean, if you found a combination that you really like and it works, there's
mhm.
obviously a bunch of places to go. I mean, just look at the myriad amps that are based on a 6L6. There's you
Yeah.
still got a lot of tonal range that you can explore because there
Mhm.
aren't a lot of amps that use it. The JTM 45 is one of those handful amps which you would think for an amp that was so popular and so important and groundbreaking that it would have influenced a lot more builders to use that tube, but it
Yeah.
it really didn't. It really didn't take off. Even Marshall,
Yeah.
wasn't very long before they went to the EL34 almost
They
exclusively.
they stopped making them. They got too expensive, and then they stopped making them altogether.
Oh, okay.
And that's when Marshall went to the EL34, and then it just kind of phased out. I don't think through the 70s, 80s, and most of the 90s you could even get KT66s.
Really?
It wasn't until the late 90s when they started reproducing them in China, and then that first decade or so they were just terrible. They just fail, and they were awful. So, but then even then, like, it's been 20 years now and you still don't see very many out there, but I guess because there weren't a ton that came before it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So yeah.
Well, that's cool. I'm glad that, it's rare that you see someone doing something unique. I know listeners that I try to pretend to get excited about every thing that's just a derivative of a thing that's come before. And I actually do because I have a sickness, and I love all things guitar gear related. But it's really cool when I see someone doing something that's not the same cut and dry thing that everybody else is doing. Oh, it's just a variation of a Fender, or oh, it's just a variation of an AC30. Um, it's super different, and so the amp sort of took off. I started seeing them everywhere. Like I see them, a lot of different players have them. um then you decide you're going to add pedals to the mix, and you just put out a brand new one a few weeks before this episode aired in the overdrive, but you've also done a fuzz, and you've done oh, my brain.
That's
Is
the
that
only
just
two
the two?
pedals for
Okay.
now. Yeah,
I knew
that's
the
the two
fuzz,
pedals.
and so overdrive. In my head, there was one more, but I think I know what I'm mixing it up with, and so I won't even say. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, so you're doing drive pedals now, and that overdrive is super rad. I'm with Buddy Blues though. His review of it, I'm not sure that you should call it an overdrive. Uh, it gets pretty intense on the
It
higher
does.
end of
Yeah.
things.
That's what I've said. I've made a joke that our next pedal will be the distortion minus, and it'll actually just be that that'll be the mild overdrive that everyone seems to love, where the gain knob is mostly useless half the way up.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Less than unity everywhere, which is I see as pointless, but
It's the blues
everyone
breaker.
seems to do. Yeah, there you go.
It's a blues breaker.
Yeah, it'll be a blues breaker or
It,
whatever. And but yeah, it's that pedal. I love it. I was never super in love with overdrive pedals. That's kind of it. It was an interesting choice for me to finally land on it and go like, I'm gonna try an overdrive, because I don't typically use them. I've tried a few that have a cool character that I like,
yeah,
but I've always been an amp straight in kind of guy. Like, I'll use fuzz or an effect that's way different than just going straight into an amp.
right.
But anytime I've wanted to use overdrive, I'll just get hotter pickups and turn the amp up, um, or maybe like a clean boost just to hit that first tube really hard,
Yeah,
And I never really got the appeal of most overdrive pedals, so I kind of wanted to make one that made me want to use it,
yeah,
you know, and so I really like the high gain stuff, but and that's the thing, that's the misconception with the people that there's a lot of gain in the overdrive plus. There's a lot of gain on top. It can get really gnarly, but it all stays super clear and super nice. But you can still get with if you want to use a strat and a low output pickup and keep the gain low. That's the problem. People have noonitis, where they want to keep everything at noon a lot of the time.
yes,
So they put everything at noon and go, oh my God, it's so loud. You turn that gain knob down to 0 or 1, and it still has just a subtle amount of gain. Because again, like I said, I don't know why anyone would want less than unity on a pedal. I just don't get that. But the yeah, it can go from those really shimmery, just like enhancer mode
hmm
overdrive tones, all the way up through crazy gain, and then you boost it and get and get even more. So I was blown away by the response that pedal has gotten so far. I made it for me, and I knew I liked it, and I figured some other people would too. But I'm seeing comments out there that are like, "This is the best overdrive pedal I've ever played," and like, there's not any negative feedback so far, and I'm so kind of humble. I'm like, wow, it's just really flattering.
yeah.
I'm excited.
Because most things that get released come with the detractors too. You can't escape it.
Mhm.
Everyone has them. If you put yourself out there, you build a thing, you make a thing, you record a thing, you're gonna get the negativity. Uh,
Yeah, I
so
was ready for it. I was prepared. I was like, okay, some people are gonna hate this thing.
yeah,
Like, I know it.
inevitably. But
Yeah.
luckily, it seems to have done really well. And I'm one of those people that I use a clean amp and I use overdrive pedals, even though I love the sound of just turning an amplifier up. But in the blues and the soul and the R&B gigs that I've gotten, where I cut my teeth and really learned to play guitar,
Mhm.
I needed to have a really pristine, clean sound available. And if I'm
Mhm.
turning the amp up, you really can't get back to that too easily. And
Right.
also, if I'm getting the amp to that point, if I ever do need that big push later, I don't really have it to get louder. It just gets dirtier.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
it's this weird balancing act, and it's horrible because I love the sound of just cranking an amp, but it isn't practical for the gigs I get hired to play.
That's true. And that's, like I said earlier, I don't gig out, so it makes sense to me why people need them.
Yeah.
I would just never want to use them because of that. Because I can always I'll just turn it up,
Yeah.
but I'm not in a setting where I need that tool really. But it was interesting making it, having that kind of fresh outlook on it, and making it for people like you or anyone else who would need one, and just seeing how, with how versatile it was, just how well received it was by so many different genres really.
Yeah. This podcast is supported in part by String Joy Strings. I'm a snob, at least that's what people tell me. I'm never okay with good enough, And that's where Stringjoy strings come in. They're better than good enough. They're the best. Stringjoy are making some of the finest strings available today right up the road from me in Nashville, Tennessee. They offer custom sets, balanced tension, coated strings, the works. If you need it, they can probably make it happen. You should be using Stringjoy strings, and if you're going to order from them, you really could help this podcast out by clicking the affiliate link down in the description or show notes below. You get amazing strings, I get a little bit of that back to help the show keep going. It's a win-win situation. Get your Stringjoy strings today.
Really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, and so also talking about your other pedal, the Silktone Fuzz that you put
Mhm.
out, that one's super interesting because you sought to solve the issue with using germanium and the issues with temperature,
Yeah.
which is actually a big deal for me. You know, I used to play. I haven't in a few years since I've COVID happened and haven't gotten back to gigging, but
Mhm.
some of the blues festivals I would play, I'd be on an outdoor, one of those typical rent a stage, plastic top stages in the
Yeah.
Mississippi heat in the middle of June, and I've got my fuzz face style pedal germanium, and it's just unusable because it's
Yeah.
cooking at 120 degrees on this black plastic. And it's really, really frustrating because it sounds so good otherwise. And I don't care what anyone says. Silicon's fine. It doesn't sound. It's not. I like the germanium sound, but it's not practical for Mississippi in the middle of June.
Yeah, it'll sound good the day before in a cooled environment for rehearsal, and then you take it out and it's like, oh,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
and now it's a monster. It
It,
sounds chuggy and weird and spitty and gated and
yeah,
yeah.
and I'm not getting any of the sustain or the what I wanted out of it.
Hmm.
And even with the bias knob, like on my Sunface, it's still I can't bias enough to counter 110-degree heat
Right.
in dead direct sunlight. So you put in this really I can't understand it. It's witchcraft. So you may have to explain it to me in terms that I can understand. The way you were able to control the temperature enough to get that under control.
Yeah, so it's kind of a standard bias control, but I do it differently where it has way more range.
Okay.
So you don't run into that problem where like on most fuzz because it so the fuzz is it's basically just a fuzz face. It's an original fuzz face circuit, but then yeah, we added all these tweaks to solve these issues. And the bias control controls both transistors, not just one of them. So
Okay.
you you can really tame it whether it's super cold out or super hot out. And the way we made it really usable was we added that meter onto it so you could see what the voltage was at any point. So um, normally a fuzz face, like the sweet spot that people really typically prefer, is around like 4.5 volts or
Mm-hmm.
so on the bias. And we made a meter so that you can see, you can actually watch if you take it out like outside at a gig like you said and the sun starts beating on it, you can watch the meter start going up because as the heat increases in the pedal, the voltage increases and the meter will monitor that and show you that the voltage is increased.
Yeah.
So before you start your gig, you can look down and go, oh man, it drifted up to 6.5 volts. I'm going to turn it back down to 4.5 where it belongs.
Yeah.
Whereas on any other pedal, it would drift up there and you would have no idea until you turned it on and it sounded like crap,
Yeah.
you know?
Have no way to do
So,
it. And I
yeah.
was one of those people that used to have the pedal power sorry, the Voodoo Lab pedal power too that
Hmm.
had the two outlets with the sag so you could
Oh, yeah.
drop the
I have that.
voltage.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was that nerd with my fuzz face plugged into it. I turned it until it sounded exactly like I wanted it to, and
Yeah.
then I broke out my multimeter and I checked the how much voltage was going to. 5.2 was what I liked, by the way. I
Yeah.
remember this very at least for that specific fuzz face. I remember that number very specifically. I don't know why. Um, but you find that where that sweet spot where you really, really like it. But then, once I got out on stage, I had no way of checking it to make sure it was
Right.
still sitting at 5.2 volts.
Yeah. That's that's the thing, and that's why we did that way, because there's other pedals out there now that do all that stuff too. There's temperature regulated ones, and the reason we went with the meters, because I like those differences. Like, I want to be able to get it down to 1 volt, where it does the velcro-y kind of spitty gated thing and does
Mm-hmm.
the nasty noises. I want to use the whole range. I just want to be able to use it when I want to and how I want to. So um that's why I made that meter, so you could just visually see, like, okay, boom, this is where I get this tone, and it's gonna be the same every time. And then there's a couple of cool things with that one too, like the cleanup knob. People really like, where
Yeah.
um, you just dial it back. A lot of people have told me that the fuzz is their favorite overdrive that they've ever had, because they can dial it back with on the cleanup and
Yeah.
just get really really cool overdrive tones.
See, I have played a gig or two, and they were mostly challenges to myself. So when you're playing the gigs that I played, a lot of blues cover gigs, a lot of soul and R&B and that kind of stuff, and
Yeah.
specifically one of the blues gigs, you start finding ways to entertain yourself,
Mm-hmm.
playing these gigs where you're playing the same, 4-hour show that you've been playing for the last 3 years, in these blues cover bands and every blues festival. So I remember I played 1 or 2 nights where I took nothing but a Sunface, a analog man
Oh,
Sunface,
nice.
and
Yeah.
that was it, and I never turned it off. And that was the challenge, is to never. I was playing a Strat at the time too, so it made a little more sense. You could do it a little
Yeah.
better, but that was the challenge, was to never turn it off. Just roll back when you wanted clean.
Yeah, you'd clean up pretty well. You just roll the, yeah.
Yeah, it was, man, it
That's
was a
cool.
lot of fun, and I wish I played more gigs like that. Most of my favorite guitars don't really clean up as easily, even with a good fuzz face circuit, because I'm playing
Mhm.
P90s and humbuckers, and they're just hitting it a little
Yeah.
harder, and cleanup's not quite the same. But it's a
But it's
really
sure fun.
it is a lot of fun. It is a whole lot of fun. And
Yeah.
I've become a fuzz junkie, even though I barely use fuzz when I gig because it doesn't make sense in most of the scenarios.
Yeah.
But at home, I always have a fuzz plugged in, and I'm always
Yeah.
just cranking it up and going now.
Yeah.
Hopefully more in the future.
Oh, totally. I'm a total fuzz head. That's why the Overdrive Plus has so much gain, because I want to be able to hit fuzz tones.
Yeah.
Because
Well, and
why not?
also,
I'm
don't
not
be
sure I'll
afraid.
release a pedal that can't do fuzz.
Well, my thing is, it'll be you're the fuzz of Chase Bliss. How every Chase Bliss pedal is a chorus if you do it right. Uh,
Right.
and yours is,
Yeah.
every pedal
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
pedal is a fuzz if you said it right. But
Yeah.
the with the overdrive, it's one of those things where it's a great lesson in, don't be afraid of the extreme ends of a knob. Be
Yeah.
willing to go, if you just want that light overdrive, dial it all the way back. Just go ahead and
Yeah.
dial it all the way. One of my favorite sounds that I ever discovered was the sound that most people just wouldn't get. I used to have Victoria model number 50212, 5212. That's their low powered Tweed Twin. And it was a
Mm.
cool amp, really cool amp. It just ultimately was something I needed to move on after having it for a little while. But
Mhm.
one of my favorite sounds was plugging a Boss SD1 into that, turning the drive all the way to nothing,
Yeah.
and turning up the level and through
Yeah.
that amp, and it just sounded so good.
Yeah. That's what I like, that low gain stuff where you turn up the level, because then you're just slamming. You're not using any of the coloration, or very little of the gain coloration of the pedal, and you're just slamming that first tube.
Uh-huh. And it sounds
So
it sounds so good, and it pushed that amp in just the right ways that it sounded really, really good. I think ultimately I
yeah.
would have kept that amp if it had reverb on it, because
uh,
reverb is a crutch for
Gotta have
me that I have
reverb.
to have.
Yeah, it's funny because, yeah, like you said, don't be afraid to turn the knob all the way down if that's where it sounds good. I've literally had people email me before and say, like, "Man, I love your amp. It sounds so good, and the tone is great. I love the treble, the nice chimey tone I can get out of it, but I have to have the treble knob almost all the way up." And I'm like, "Oh yeah,
So turn it up.
so so what's wrong with it being right there? Like, there's a maximum range for limit. I didn't want it to go further than that, because who wants that? Then it's just it hurts your ears and it's nasty. I like to be able to use the whole range of the knob whenever possible, you know. So just to account for different pickups or stuff like that, I'll leave in a little bit of wiggle room. But um, yeah, so many amps that I play, it's only usable. You know, the treble will only be usable between like, 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock, and outside of that, people feel like they're doing something wrong half the time. And
That's
it's like,
that.
no,
Oh,
like, yeah, I
that,
don't get it.
yeah.
Yeah.
That same thing with bass control on amps. A lot of people are really scared. They're like, "This amp's so bassy." I'm like, "Well, where have you got the bass knob? At 5?
Yeah, turn it
Turn it
down.
down.
Yeah.
Turn it."
It's funny how many guitarists don't know how to use knobs as long as they've been playing guitar. It's really it really shocked me when I got into this, because I'm used to I tweak knobs all the time. I always have. And starting to do this, I'd watch people would come over and be like, "Yeah, I don't know, I can't really find a tone." And I'm like, "Well, you didn't move you didn't do anything." And they're like, "Well, I moved it a little bit." And I'm like, "No, go down here and go up here." And so I started releasing like with my amps, I have a little card of like suggested settings to like get you started, and just showing like how much range you can get out of actually moving these knobs. And I say right on it, don't be afraid to dime everything.
Yeah.
Just turn it all up and just see how it goes.
That's the thing. You got to be willing to explore the range of every knob all the way through, and not feel like you're doing something wrong if you
Mhm.
leave something on 0 or
Yeah,
10, or it if that's the thing that sounds good, then it sounds good. That
yeah.
you don't have to, like, um I've got a 2 rock amp, and the traditional clean, and the reverb is really amazing, right?
Hmm.
But you don't have to turn it up very loud to get a lot of reverb. And
Right.
so there, I had to fight myself where I'm like, but it's only on like 1 for reverb, and it feels like a
Yeah,
lot of reverb. I'm like, well,
I'm
awesome.
wasting it.
Yeah, I'm wasting it. Like, yeah, like I should use all of this.
I paid good money for it to go to 10.
I did pay
Yeah.
good money for it to go to 10, but yeah, but it's like, it, if that's what sounds good, that's what sounds good. You don't have to turn it up to there. You can leave it where it is. Or I used to joke about old Marshalls. Um, the tone stack basically was a suggestion. They didn't really exist. Like where the
Right.
tone on an old Marshall sounded best was, I used to gig with a keep saying almost saying basement. It's the super bass, the 100 watt
Right.
super bass. I gigged with one of those, and basically I just turned all the knobs to 10
Yeah,
because
that's where they belong.
yeah,
It's
that's where they belonged.
yeah.
They barely did anything when you dropped them all the way down anyway, so you may as well run them wide open and get
Yeah.
full maximum gain out of it, basically.
Yeah, there's only knobs there for if all your other stuff is broken for some reason,
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
just to compensate.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
So, uh, and so what year did you start release the Silktone amp? I'm trying to remember.
So that came out at the very end of 2019,
Mm.
and it I think I had RJ Ronquillo do a demo first,
Mm-hmm.
and the demo did really well. I got a Premier Guitar review. They reviewed it, got a glowing review, and I got a lot of attention and a lot of dealer inquiries just from that Premier Guitar thing. Um, so I started, I got a few orders in, and I started making amps. And I was like, oh man, this is gonna work. This is gonna be cool. Um, and then COVID hit,
Yeah.
and everyone was like, well, pull our orders. We don't want to bring in any new brands. We don't know what the hell's happening. It's understandable, but at the time
Fair.
it was soul crushing because it was
Yes.
just like, oh man, what do I do? So I basically closed up shop then, and figured some stuff out. And we ended up moving from the Bay Area up to Sacramento. Um, and then I basically relaunched the amp in um I think it was March or April 2021.
Okay.
So for a whole year there, it was just like, I'm just gonna I'm gonna focus on some other stuff and let this kind of blow over and kind of see what happens. So we came up here because we were able to buy a place, and I got a really cool the shop you see is part of the house. Because it's just me and a couple dudes. We just build it out of basically my garage here, and but yeah, I was able to get that cool environment where I could get production down, and then relaunch when I was ready. And it's just kind of been snowballing from there. Ryan at Demos in the Dark did the first demo for the relaunch,
Uh huh.
and dealers took notice again. And I reached out to a few people reached out to me, and it's just been growing and growing. People loved it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I, I haven't. I've it's again been really flattering just seeing how much people responded to it for what it was. Again, I made that thing because I loved it, and it's always so cool to hear anything good said about something you've created.
Yeah. So on top of that, so what I'm doing is I'm building this timeline. So 2021, we're gonna call like the real start
That's the
because
real
yeah,
start.
because
That was basically, yeah.
I knew where this was going the moment you said late 2019. I was like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, no, I know where this is going. I feel like we
Okay.
all do. It's
Yeah.
like anything that happened in that weird like October 2019 to January 2020, we know that things are about to get weird. Like
Yeah.
I can't wait to read the history books
Right.
when they talk about that time period. Um, so 21, you relaunch the amp by
Mhm.
22. You're putting out the fuzz.
Yeah.
23, you put out this is what I think is the coolest thing you make, just personally, the Micronaut.
Yeah.
And it is the raddest, most it is the coolest little box. Listeners, if you're not familiar with the Silktone Micronaut, you need to go look it up. It's this little, I don't know the actual dimensions, but it looks about 6 by 6 by 6.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, 7 or 8 by 6 by something. It's pretty
Something,
close. Yeah.
yeah, pretty close. This little box of fun. It's an amp, it's a drive, it's a preamp. Like, dude, that's the coolest little box ever. To the point that on Guitar Nerds last year for Gear of the Year, we gave it Amp of the Year because I think it's like the coolest, most versatile uh, thing that was put out last year.
Hell yeah, that's awesome. I was honored by that. That was so cool to hear.
Yeah. So what inspired that idea?
Man, I don't know. It, it just kind of came, like I was just thinking of stuff to do, and I really wanted to do. I really like small amps, like a Champ or something.
Yeah.
With their undersized transformers. Because you can just hit it. A lot of people go for bigger and bigger transformers because they want it to stay clean. They want the big bass tones out of it. But there's nothing quite like transformer saturation.
Yeah.
And as much as I like the Silktone amp, if I could only use one amp, it would be that one. It'd be the Silktone amp. But in a way, I'd say the Micronaut is my favorite thing that I've made, just because of, like you said, it's just a little box of fun. It's
Yeah.
so fun. Like it doesn't have the versatility quite of a big amp, like the Silktone amp or something,
Yeah.
but it can hit tones that the Silktone amp absolutely can't touch. Like just the raw saturated drive of it is so cool. And I'm trying to remember where I came up with the idea to do the line out the way I did, but the reason I was able to do it was because I'm working with Brian Sowers, a transformer
Yep.
maker, and I had the idea before that, and it was I wanted to do. I've never liked the way line out has been done out of an amp before, because it's always, I'm jumping around a lot, but
No, you're fine.
my favorite part of amp distortion is power tube distortion.
Yes.
Preamp tube distortion is cool, that's fine, but I really like power tube distortion when you're really pushing that last power tube, especially in a single-ended amp like the
Yeah.
Silktone amp or the Micronaut. You just get that huge fat tone out of it, and line outs in amps are usually taken off like the preamp section, so you miss all that. And or it'll be taken like resistively off of the speaker tap or something, and you plug it in and it just doesn't really sound like the amp sounds. The whole reaction is different. So the unique thing about the Micronaut is the line out is a whole separate transformer tap. So we have the output transformer that goes to the speaker, and there's one winding for the speaker, and there's an identical winding at a lower or at a higher impedance for a line out. And it uses when you use that line out, it engages a reactive load on the speaker top. So the amp always thinks it's seeing a speaker, whether one's plugged in or not.
Right.
And you get that clarity and the response out of that line out that you normally wouldn't. And it allowed you to go straight into a DAW and record your tone as is, or throw it into an IR, or my favorite thing to do, use it like a little fuzz box and throw it into the front end of another amp. Like if you're using big, huge clean amps, like you were saying, you have your big clean tone and you can throw that thing in front of it and basically turn it into like a little 100-watt Micronaut,
Yeah.
you know? So
It,
you get all the color and voice from it. And it's like that. Oh man, some of the coolest tones I've ever heard out of that thing.
to me, it feels like, and now thinking, see, it's funny because now that I'm hearing you describe the Micronaut, and now that I know your background in um, hi-fi setups, it
Mm-hmm.
feels like a hi-fi piece of gear. Even though I know it's not
Right.
high fidelity, that's it's not a tonal
Right.
thing. It looks like and feels like a piece of hi-fi gear. So now I
Yeah.
get the aesthetics of it.
Exactly. I love that old set, like the 70s hi-fi with the panel, the like
Yeah.
wood enclosure with the, the aluminum panel or silver panel. Um, yeah, I love that look. So,
Well, on top of that, because of the preamp function, it's something that I don't understand, and it maybe it will, maybe that'll be the eventuality of it, but it needs to be on the desk of every recording guitarist out there because it
yeah.
feels like the ultimate versatility tool to use when you're recording guitar. Or actually, I'm sitting here thinking reamping things through it, like running
Yeah.
drums through it just to add that tube
Yeah.
saturation or
Or vocals are cool too.
vocals.
Yeah.
Yes.
Vocals are really cool because you get that color and
See,
yeah.
I'm playing a blues festival in April. That my setup for it, because I've decided I wanted to do it as a solo thing, but I
Mhm.
didn't want to just play an acoustic guitar and sing. Right? I feel it's super
Right.
super boring. There's no vibe to that. Right?
Yeah.
So instead, I'm gonna do I'm singing into a harmonica mic
Mm.
and running that into um, a a light. I've got to pick a light drive that I want to just to add some character to it,
Yeah.
and a reverb, and running that in the first channel of a super reverb,
Yeah.
and I'm running my guitar through a couple of things like a light drive and a compressor because I'm playing a Mule Mavis, so
Oh, okay.
the electric resonator kind of thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I'm running that into the second channel of my super so that I can get the tremolo and the reverb there. And so I'm just thinking like something like a Micronaut sitting on top of an amp, run a harmonica mic into it just to add that
Yeah.
coolness to it to run out into the amp would be super rad. So it's
Yeah.
like I think there's so many ways to use a box like the Micronaut.
Yeah, and I mean I had a ton of ideas with it, and even in like the demo that I shot for it, I showed off a lot of cool ways to use it.
Mm-hmm.
And I like using it as a front end, like your first drive pedal, and then running modulation effects out of the line out and then into a big amp,
Yeah.
so you get that big. So it's kind of like a faux effects loop, like. So, but what I've been surprised by is how many people have emailed me and told me how they use it. I'm like, damn, I didn't even think of that.
Yeah.
Uh, it's I'm drawing a blank now, trying to think of one,
Oh,
one of the
that's
instances.
I'm
But
so
there's
bad
so
at that
many,
too.
yeah, there's so many ways to use it. It's so cool. One of my favorite ways to use it is I have the little 10-inch companion cab that goes with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll do the Micronaut and take the speaker out into the companion cab. So it's like a dry signal. And you just get the tone of the Micronaut and whatever's in front of it. And then taking the line out and, like I said, into modulation and another amp and running that also. So it's like a pseudo stereo thing,
Yeah.
And that's one of my favorite things to do is,
It's actually almost it's like a wet dry instead of
yep,
stereos. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's really fun to do it that way. And I
It's
think that's the way we did it on the demo I recorded, and we got, yeah, just really cool tones out of it. Because that's, yeah, I I like the functionality of stuff, but it 100% comes down to the sound quality and tone for me.
Yes, it's got to sound good.
Yeah.
So we were talking before we recorded that about the time this episode comes out, you've also are about to launch a new amp. So
Yeah,
there's
so
something
that
else
one,
coming.
I won't say the name yet because
Sure.
I'm not sure if it will be out. It should be, but things always go wrong.
Right. Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
but yeah, one of the main requests I've gotten is for a higher powered amp,
Yeah.
and it's not going to be crazy high powered. It's still going to be single ended because I really like the single ended stuff, and you can't get too crazy with it. But it will be a higher powered version of basically of the Silktone amp, and a lot of different tweaks. Um, we added a couple voice channels and stuff like that, and changed the cab, not the cab design. It'll look the same, but it'll sound it'll sound different. It has enough differentiation to not just be another Silktone amp.
Right.
I like it. I actually like it a lot more. But yeah, that's something to look out for, and it will also use KT66s still.
Love it. I like the consistency. It's
Yeah,
having a brand, having a clear vision of like, no, we're going to use these because I
yeah.
like these.
It's just I've tried to, like, even with this amp, I was like, oh, I want to do something different. I already have a KT66 amp. I'm going to do a 6L6 this time.
Mhm.
So I design it and I throw 6L6s in, and then I try the KTs again, and I'm like, what? I'm not going to make it sound worse on purpose. Like,
Right.
they just sound so good. They
I'm
sound so good. People don't use them because, again, like we said earlier, there's most amps out there are the spawn of something else.
right.
It's just someone's take on a super reverb or whatever with a few tweaks. And I'm not saying mine isn't either. The Silktone amp has a lot of like vintage Fender DNA in it.
Sure.
There's I started with circuits I liked, I tweaked them, and then I added my own original twist to it. But you don't see a lot of KT66s because of that, and also because they're so damn expensive.
Yeah. They are.
So
They are. I
yeah,
looked them up
people,
while we were talking.
yeah, KT6s. I mean, yeah, 6L6s are less than half the cost. So as an amp maker, you're releasing something, and most of the time people only look at wattage and feature or whatever. So if it's going to save the builder $100 to use
Mhm.
6L6s instead of KTs, they're going to do it
They're
because it
gonna
makes
do it.
sense.
Yeah.
But I'm a psychopath, and when I like I said, I fucking hate money for some reason, and when I hear something that sounds better to me, I I can't not use it.
Right. You're gonna do
Like
that.
like goddamn Brian Sowers and his stupid magical transformers. Like, when I use those transformers, it costs me so much more money than it used to.
Yeah.
The transformers I used before, uh they were good, they were fine, everyone loved the amp. The reviews that came out was with the old transformers. There's no reason I needed to change it to use sour sound, but I heard it and I went, oh shit, I can't go back, I can't not use these now. So I ate the cost, and I didn't raise the cost on the amp for a very long time,
Yeah.
and I really should have. But I like to keep things as accessible as possible without completely going broke. And
Yeah, I heard Brian
yeah.
talk on the Truth About Vintage Amps
Oh, that was a fun
podcast.
episode, huh?
That was, and I felt like an idiot, like listening to him talk.
Yeah.
I already listened to that podcast and only have I understand about 25% of the things Skip says, amp
Yeah.
related or not, just to be honest. But um when Brian came on, I was like, he speaks another language
I
that
heard that from a lot of people. It's funny.
I
My my guys around here will hear us talking on the phone here and there, and it always made me laugh. Like, I remember the first time one of my builders was listening, and he heard us talking, designing an amp and talking transformers, and Brian Sowers going on and on talking about oh, you get leakage inductance because of this, and we've got to change the butt stack to be this much and this much. And um anyway, I forget what he said, but we stopped, and my guy said, yeah, I was listening to you guys, and I was like, Jesus, Brian Sowers is a genius. And then you chime in and you're like, oh yeah, so that'll change the high frequency roll off because of this, and you totally got what he was saying. And I was like, shit, Charles is a genius too. But I don't feel that way at all. I just like, I don't talk super technical but I understand it for sure because I've
Yeah.
been doing this for so long.
Yeah.
But yeah, listening to Brian talk is just like even me. Same thing. I'm just like I'm the stupid one in the room when that dude talks. He
Yeah.
knows his shit. He knows his stuff.
It
So
absolutely was mind-boggling,
yeah,
and I had no way of knowing whether or not he actually knew what he was talking about because I was so lost.
or
But
just making it
but
up.
or just making it up. But I walked away believing that
Yeah,
he makes the best transformers on the
yeah.
planet because he seems to
Well,
understand them.
the cool thing about him, and I talk about this guy way too much. He should start paying me.
Yeah.
But but the he do you know that he's a Grammy award winning produce like he produced a record and won a Grammy for the sound?
I think they mentioned that on, or someone has mentioned it, but it's one of those that sat on the fringe of my knowledge. Like I never remember it till someone
Yeah.
mentions it.
So the point is that he has really good ears.
Yeah.
Other transformer makers, they make transformers and they make transformers for guitar amps and cars and microwaves and appliances, and they don't give a crap which is for which. Like
Yeah.
they'll say that they're niche guitar or whatever, but they just take a design and they put it out, and they're not listening to them. They don't know how they sound. Brian knows how they sound.
Yeah.
I can talk to Brian and say, "Oh, it sounds a little flubby in the lows and I want it to bloom in the mids a bit." And he goes, "Cool, I got you." And and he'll design it differently because of that. And or you can go to him with all the technical stuff and he'll laugh at you and do it the way he wants to anyway.
It
But
reminds me of when I first talked to Jesse from 29 Pedals for the first time.
oh, he's a fun guy to talk to. I
He's
love
another
Jesse.
guy that's got ears. Just
Yeah.
they hear in a different way. I actually had I'm trying to remember now if it was in a recorded part of the podcast, but I had David from Great Eastern Effects on the podcast, and at some point I can't remember if it was just in a chat between episodes or it was on the recorded episode or on
Mhm.
the Patreon. You talk to people enough, you forget when and where you talk to people. But we talked about the fact that I've been on this track of like really believing that so much of the way we interpret things is in our heads to the point that it's almost uh, I don't know, we almost can't trust what we hear to be what other people hear.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because we all interpret it differently. Sometimes it's through knowledge. Sometimes it's through uh, the sheer just physical, the way our ear works physically,
Yeah.
because they're all slightly different. And I made the comment that how we all poke fun at Eric Johnson because he claims he can hear the difference in battery brands and fuzz pedals, right?
Right, right.
And my response is, what if he can?
He
Like
probably can. Yeah.
maybe he can, and maybe there's a few other people out there that can, but most of us can't. And we
Or
make
don't
fun of
care.
him or
Yeah.
don't care. Yeah, or don't care. But we poke fun at him when actually he can hear it. And
Right.
because there we know that there are people on this planet who are truly tone deaf. They hear everything in monotone. We don't
That's
know.
that's so bizarre to me.
It
Yeah.
is. It blows my mind that exists. But we know that that is a thing. For there are a hand. I don't know how many. I don't know the percentage. It's probably very, very low.
2.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But conversely, wouldn't it make sense that there are people on the other end of the spectrum that hear things that the average person, absolutely cannot hear?
Yeah. Well, so I think I've talked about this before, so sorry if this is a repeat for anyone, but I was reading an article written by or it was an interview with Kevin Shields from My Bloody Valentine.
Mm.
And if you aren't familiar with that band, they're known for being one of the loudest, most just obnoxiously loud and noisy bands you'll ever hear. I've seen them live a couple times, and they literally steal like four or five senses of yours. Like the light show is so crazy that you can't see anything. They're so loud that you can't hear anything or feel anything because you're just being vibrated by all the bass.
Yeah.
And I guess you can still smell, but
I can already smell the smells that I would smell at that
right.
concert.
So even when I saw them outside, I was like, okay, this will be a lot milder. We're outside. It's Coachella. It won't be as bad. No, it was they completely destroyed other bands. I walked to the bathroom to see, and I walked by like Public Enemy trying to do their set, and they're just looking over at the other tent, like, what the fuck? They couldn't even perform.
Oh
Um,
my
it
god.
was ridiculous. But anyway, the interviewer was asking Kevin Shields, like, you've destroyed your ears, like with all the loud shows you've played, like even with earplugs, like you have to be messed up. You have to have had some hearing loss when you go into the studio and you're mixing this stuff. How do you know that you're mixing it right? Because like, how do you know you're not just mixing it for you, and your high end hearing's got to be gone? And he had a really interesting response, and he said that he had been doing a study on psychoacoustics and everything, and how when you do that stuff every day, and your whole life is listening, playing, listening, tweaking stuff, listening, mixing, anything like that. If you monitor the brain activity of someone who does that every day versus someone who's just hearing it for the first time, the person who does it all the time, their brain is like 10 times more active. There's way more going on
Yeah.
inside. So it makes up for all that stuff. You hear it anyway because your brain knows what to do and what to listen for. It just allocates it different. I thought that was super interesting.
Yeah.
Could be bullshit, but,
Well, hey, it sounds good. It's the right
yeah,
it's the right mix of science and music that really intrigues me, that I get really
yeah,
fascinated. And I think there's a lot to be really looked at in there,
yeah.
and really understanding how we interpret sounds, and how I talked about when I was talking to David, that how when I got to music school, which I was a guitar player in music school. They didn't have like an actual guitar program, but when I first got there and I got into ear training class, I actually had trouble determining times if the pitch was higher or lower than the reference pitch.
Oh wow.
And it took me a while before my brain learned how to listen to it to interpret what it was doing.
Yeah.
Some people do that naturally, some people
Yeah.
don't.
That's crazy to me too, because like as much as I do this, and as as good as people say or think my ears are, um I think I have pretty decent ears. I do this a lot, but I still can't. I can't. I don't tune guitars without a tuner.
Yeah,
I don't go, oh, yep, that's G E. Okay, cool. Like boom, boom, boom. And I see other people just,
just do
you
it.
know, just yeah, they just nail it out like nothing. And that was always impressive to me. But I think, yeah, I think there's something to that. I think people hear different. I mean, the frequency range is so interactive. Like if you cut some treble, you're going to accentuate mids and bass.
Yeah,
You're not just cutting treble, you're boosting the other. It's going to come into focus way more
yeah,
in your brain, you know? So um even like e- you cup your ear, or you move your ear a little bit backwards or forwards or whatever, and just listen how the sound of something changes in front of you. Just ear structure will change the way someone hears a sound, like the
yeah.
same sound. Where you're standing in the room it'll sound completely different whether you're over here versus right in front of it. So there's so much that goes into play. It's not surprising that so many people like so many different things. One person's favorite amp is one person's, you know
Most hated amp. Yeah.
most hated amp. Yeah.
Yeah. So Charles, we could keep going, but we have blown past the hour mark, and I want to get us over to the Patreon episode where we're going to talk a little more,
Cool.
because like when I was in California and we sat there and talked, we must have talked for an hour and a half, two
Yeah.
hours. Like, so we could go on, and we absolutely could. But in the interest of making sure we get over and not exhaust all of our talking for Patreon, we're going to move over. Where can everyone find you on the internet?
uh I run all my stuff. So if you need to get a hold of me, you can call the phone number on the website, which is www.silktone.org,
Mm,
or Instagram. I'm, Silktone Amps. You can find me. I answer all the emails. I answer all the DMs. I answer all the phone calls. So I'm always glad to talk if you have amp questions or want to inquire about some custom stuff or whatever. Yeah, it's
awesome. So those links are down below, listeners, in the description, or in the show notes if you were listening to this on a podcast player. While you're down there, be sure to click follow or subscribe or thumbs up or bell icon or leave a comment, whatever it is on the platform you were listening or watching this on. Leave a review, rate, all those things. If you're interested in the Patreon content that we record every week, the royal we, me and my guest, record, you can go over to patreon.com/40watt podcast, where for $5 a month, you can get bonus episodes every week, as well as the main episode ad free. You don't have to hear all of the little ads sprinkled throughout the episode and the ending. Other than that, I did look up, and I meant to mention this earlier, so I want to mention it on the main episode. For those of you that are wondering, when we were talking about how expensive KT66s are, you can go over to Sweetwater. They sell the Genelex Gold Lion KT66 for $130 for a matched set. And that's expensive, but that seems fairly affordable for KT6s, 66s, to be honest. They get more expensive than that, but
Yeah.
they're not, I don't think they're, gotta cash out the retirement fund expensive, but they are when you're used to buying 6L6s. They're almost twice the price.
Mm-hmm.
So awesome. In the meantime, we're going to move over to Patreon. Listeners, as usual, be good to yourselves, be kind to each other, and make some noise.